Hi, my name is Valentina, and this is the story of how they called me the weird cousin with the failed startup. Right there in front of everyone at the family dinner. But later, they saw me on the cover of Forbes as the woman behind $1 billion empire. Funny how things change, right? Grab your coffee and come with me. I got the invitation on an ordinary afternoon while reviewing reports in my glass-walled office, surrounded by the skyline I built on my own. Valentina, we're organizing a family dinner at the farm. We hope you can come. The message popped up cold on the screen. No emojis, no warmth, no context. I just stared at those words, like looking at a familiar stranger suddenly reappearing. My heart skipped, not out of joy, but out of that involuntary jolt. I thought about deleting it, moving on, pretending I never saw it. But my fingers didn't move. The invitation just sat there, staring back at me. For days, I opened it, closed it, opened it again. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say yes. The thought of seeing those people who had always gone out of their way to belittle me made my throat tighten. But the chance to quietly show them that I was doing just fine, that tempted me. That old, naive hope whispered, maybe this time they'll see me differently. I knew I shouldn't expect anything, but I couldn't help it. Maybe time had softened the grudges, or maybe not. I chose my outfit the way a warrior chooses her armor. Understated, solid, impenetrable. Black slacks, a soft blouse, comfortable shoes. My hair pulled back into a tight bun, like I always did for important meetings. The perfume, subtle but distinct, my silent signature. I wasn't there to show off, but I wasn't about to shrink myself either. I wanted to say without saying it, I am whole, strong, and, most of all, at peace. The outfit wasn't vanity. It was my shield. Driving down the dirt road lined with old trees, the past crept in through every crack of memory. I saw myself as a child hearing the muffled laughs. The weird cousin. The teenager who talked about business, while everyone else just wanted to gossip about boyfriends. The dreamer entrepreneur, always said with that tone of amusement, as if they were entertained by my failure long before it could even happen. The steering wheel felt heavier with every mile, but I kept going. The wooden gate was open, creaking softly in the wind, almost whispering, "Come in if you dare!" I parked under the shade of a mango tree, took a deep breath, adjusted my blouse, and looked in the rearview mirror. Same place, same house, same porch with those wicker chairs that had heard so many stories and so many silences. I walked up to the entrance with firm steps, but my stomach was in knots. I rehearsed possible questions in my mind, prepared short, polite, but sharp answers. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. They greeted me with hugs that felt more like formalities than affection, arms that barely wrapped around me, forced smiles, eyes scanning me from head to toe like they were assessing, not welcoming. No one asked how I'd been. No one complimented my presence. They just went through the motions, like guests showing up to an event out of obligation. I looked around and felt like a stranger invading my own story. My mother was there, leaning against the porch pillar, arms crossed. She didn't come to me. She didn't open her arms. She didn't say she'd missed me. She just muttered, "Glad you could make it." Her tone was flat, dry like greeting the mailman. She didn't look me in the eyes, just stared at the tip of her shoe, like she always did when she didn't want to face something that hurt more than years of absence, more than all the jokes, more than any silence that had come before. My gut screamed, my chest tightened. Something was off. The mood wasn't festive, not even close to reconciliation. It was a play, with actors going through a script they'd long memorized. Cold hugs, plastic smiles, hollow conversations. But me, stubborn as always, wanted to believe it could be different. Maybe the ice would break. Maybe someone would say, "It's really good to see you." I gripped the handle of my bag tightly and decided, I'm going to give this a chance. I sat at the table, laid the napkin over my lap, and forced a smile. The smell of homemade food drifted from the kitchen, mixing with the invisible weight in the air. The conversations were formal, superficial, like someone spreading butter on bread while carefully avoiding the mold. I took a deep breath, looked around, and thought, okay, Valentina, let's see where this goes. Deep down, though, I already knew exactly where it was going. The conversation started off lukewarm, almost polite, like they were just going through the motions without much enthusiasm. But soon enough, the first jabs came, predictable and cruel as always. So, Valentina, still living that kind of unstable life, one of my uncles sneered, looking at me like someone staring at a painting they never liked. I smiled politely, like someone who's heard that question 1,000 times. The discomfort started rising, like heat tightening my throat and freezing my breath. I kept my composure. It was just the beginning. It didn't take long for another to jump in, with that tone pretending to be a joke, but hiding nothing but venom. Yeah, nobody really knows what you even do, right? They all laughed, that muffled, complicit kind of laugh, like I was just the afternoon's entertainment. I gripped my water glass tightly, feeling the cold of the glass against the warmth of my skin. How could they keep repeating the same tired script, with the same lousy punchlines, and still amuse themselves? And me, there I was again, their favorite target. Then came the comparisons, as inevitable as a forecasted storm. Look at Julia, already a top lawyer at a big firm. And Felipe? Renowned doctor, packed with patience. And Gabriel, the successful businessman. And you, Valentina? Their voices piled on top of each other, like blow after blow, not giving me a second to breathe. I felt cornered, exposed, like standing trial without a defense, only accusations. They laughed, exchanged glances, raised their glasses, and I sat there, shrinking in my seat. I took a deep breath, trying to gather strength and keep my dignity intact. Actually, I founded a company, I said, my voice as steady as I could make it, while my fingers fiddled with the edge of the napkin, searching for some anchor. We're growing. We've already landed some important clients. I wanted to say more, to explain, to show them, but I didn't even get the chance. Before I could finish, I was cut off. As always, like my story wasn't even worth telling. A company? One of my cousins interrupted, with that mocking grin I knew all too well. Just another one of those trendy failed startups. The words hit the table like a gunshot, triggering loud, unrestrained laughter. Some banged their hands on the table. Others leaned back in their chairs, relishing their own cruelty. My chest tightened, my throat closed up, but I kept my gaze steady, unmoving. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. The jokes kept coming, like relentless waves crashing over me. What? You a millionaire now? One uncle sneered, setting off another round of laughter. Or just faking it for Instagram? Another chimed in, sipping his wine. While they enjoyed themselves, I looked around, searching for a friendly glance, a helping hand, a pause. But there was nothing. I was surrounded by people, yet completely alone at that table. Like I always had been. Desperate for some kind of support, I turned to my mother. She was there across the table, fiddling with her napkin, focused on her plate, as if the world around her didn't exist. She didn't move a muscle, didn't say a word, didn't even lift her eyes. She just sat there, still, silent, complicit by omission. And that hurt more than all the jokes combined. She who should have been my shield was just another cold wall in that scene. The pain tore through me inside, but outwardly I was nothing but calm. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shove in their faces who I really was, what I had built. But I stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of strategy. I knew that any attempt to defend myself would be twisted, ridiculed, weaponized against me, like it always had been. So I took a deep breath, gripped my glass even tighter, and endured it silently, like I always had, like I always survived. I finished the dinner in silence, with a broken smile that hid far more than it revealed. I got up before dessert was even served, grabbed my bag, looked at them one last time, and simply said, "Thanks for the invitation." No one replied. I walked to the door with steady steps, but a heart in pieces. And right there, at that very moment, I made a silent promise. I would never again allow them to humiliate me. Never again. I left that dinner with a wounded soul, but with a promise carved deep into my chest. I would never go back there as a victim. I would never again allow those people to reduce me to a joke, a cruel comparison, an empty label. I would never sit at that table again with my heart clenched, begging silently for scraps of affection. I deserved more, so much more. And right then, in that exact moment, I decided. My story would be written far from there, far from judging eyes and cheap laughter. I dove into my work like someone plunging into a deep, silent ocean, without fear, without hesitation. I doubled my effort, tripled my focus, hardened my discipline. While they laughed at my unstable life, I was attending events, securing partnerships, holding meetings that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Every no I heard, every investor who looked at me with condescension, was fuel for the next yes. I became relentless, obsessed, determined to turn my small company into something undeniable. My company, a tech platform focused on digital wellness, slowly but steadily began to gain ground. At first, just a few clients, modest contracts, but each one was celebrated like another brick in the dream I was building. Gradually, people started to see the value in what I offered: tools to reduce stress, improve mental health, promote balance in how we use technology. While they still called me the weird cousin, thousands of people were using what I had created. Then came the first Innovation Awards invitations to speak at conferences, interviews on niche blogs. Each achievement was quiet, discreet, kept just for me. I didn't post about it, didn't send updates to the family. I wasn't looking for applause. I kept it close, like someone protecting a precious treasure, far too valuable to expose to those who had never known how to appreciate it. And soon after, the funding rounds began. And they weren't small. They were numbers I couldn't even have imagined years earlier. I worked day and night, no vacations, no breaks, turning down family invitations that occasionally came through. I didn't answer calls, didn't reply to messages. I kept my distance, not out of resentment, but out of self-preservation. I needed space, silence, absolute focus. I learned that solitude, contrary to everything they'd made me believe, could be a fertile place, a place where I could thrive without fear, without judgment, just me and my dreams. Within a few years, the startup had transformed into a global reference in digital wellness. Major corporations adopted our solutions, schools implemented our programs, hospitals recommended our apps. What they once mocked as just another trendy failed startup had now become essential to millions of people. And the most ironic part? Some of them were probably using my products, without even knowing they were mine. The crowning moment came at 32, when I was selected by Forbes as one of the 30 under 30. Yes, I'd technically missed the age cutoff, but they made an exception because of the global impact of my work. I remember that day vividly. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and cried, alone in my glass-walled office. Not because of the achievement itself, but because of what it represented. I had won, not with speeches, not with explanations, but with results. And no one could take that away from me. A year later, the cover, the woman behind the $1 billion empire. My photo splashed across it, my name in bold, interviews, invitations, events. Everything that had once seemed so far away was now just part of my routine. I looked at that cover and smiled. I didn't post it anywhere, didn't send it to anyone. I just printed it, framed it, and hung it on my office wall. That was enough. I knew who I was. And for the first time, that was all I needed. And then, like destiny itself had a sense of humor, another family invitation arrived. We're organizing a lunch at the farm. It'd be great to see you. I read the message and smiled, alone, in the same office where I had built my story. I didn't hesitate. I accepted the invitation. But this time, I wasn't bringing hope. I wasn't looking for acceptance. I was bringing only certainty about who I was, what I had built, and above all, that I would never go back there as a victim. I accepted the invitation without any expectations, but with the unshakable certainty of someone who knows exactly who they've become. There was no more room for illusions, no more of that childish longing to be accepted. I wasn't going to prove anything, nor to explain myself. I was going simply as who I am, complete, accomplished, and above all, free. This time there was no anxiety, no fear, none of that suffocating need to please. There was only a strange serenity, like someone watching the end of a movie, already knowing exactly how it ends. I decided the arrival had to be different. I wasn't going to make that old, humiliating trek down the dirt road, or cross through the gate with my eyes cast down, like I had so many times before. No, I chartered a helicopter. Not for show, but for practicality, and yes, for the impact I knew it would have. I didn't want to come off as arrogant, but I wasn't going to be discreet either. I wanted them to know I had arrived. Not with words, not with explanations, but with presence. As the helicopter lifted off from the city helipad, I closed my eyes for a few seconds, feeling the vibration of the blades and the heavy sound cutting through the air. It felt like a rite of passage, a symbol of closure and rebirth all at once. I opened my eyes and watched through the window as the world shrank beneath me. My heart beat calmly. I knew this wasn't just a physical trip. It was an emotional crossing. Maybe the last one I'd ever have to make in relation to that place. Flying over the farm felt like revisiting an old movie scene I'd seen before, but that no longer hurt. From up above, everything looked small, distant, almost irrelevant. The tables set up under the trees, the white tablecloths, the cars neatly parked, the children running around. And then, slowly, the adults standing up, shielding their eyes from the sun, trying to make out who was arriving. The helicopter hovered over the field, interrupting their lunch with a loud roar of its blades. Everyone stopped, stepped outside, looked up, and started whispering. The murmurs started even before I opened the door. "Who does she think she is?" I heard clearly, even over the noise. "She probably just rented it to show off," someone added, followed by muffled laughs. The same voices as always, repeating the same snap judgments. Nothing there had changed except me. Some laughed, some whispered, others just stood frozen, watching, unsure if they should applaud or criticize. And me, inside, calmly adjusting my hair before stepping out. The snide remarks didn't take long. "It's just marketing. She just wants attention. Someone who needs to show she made it." I smiled quietly. There was no need to argue, no need to prove anything. The helicopter said it all. I stepped down with the same serenity I'd boarded with. Steady steps, upright posture, calm gaze. Wearing an elegant outfit, medium heels, my hair neatly tied back, sunglasses on. Like someone who knows exactly what they're doing and doesn't apologize for it. I walked toward the porch where they were all gathered, still stunned by the scene. Their eyes followed me, desperate to find some flaw, some misstep, some sign of weakness. But there was none. I greeted them all with a polite, steady smile, no need for explanations. Just a simple "good morning" as I looked at each face, each expression of surprise, disbelief, and maybe, just maybe, a little envy. I didn't need to say anything else. My mother was the only one who moved. She ran to hug me like she always had, or rather, like she never had before. The hug was tight, longer than I expected, and her expression this time was different. I don't know if it was pride, fear, regret, or a little bit of all three. I didn't ask. I just hugged her back with the same serenity I had when stepping out of that helicopter. There was no more resentment, no more expectations. Just a strange, quiet peace. After the hug, I walked over to the table, with everyone still standing, unsure of what to say or do, scrambling to find words that made sense. I sat down calmly, pulled out the chair with grace, crossed my legs, and reached for a glass of water. The sound of the helicopter in the distance faded until it was gone completely. The silence now was different, dense, heavy, loaded with questions no one dared to ask. And me, I simply sat there existing. As I stirred my water, I looked around and realized they were still trying to figure out exactly what had just happened. Same place, same trees, same people. But nothing was the same anymore. The helicopter had landed, sure. But more than that, I had landed there in a way they never imagined possible. And in that collective silence, for the very first time, I wasn't the joke. I was the impact. As I casually picked at my salad, I noticed a subtle movement out of the corner of my eye. One of my cousins quietly pulling her phone under the table, trying to act natural, but her face gave her away. She glanced at me, then back at her screen, like she needed to confirm a suspicion that made her uneasy. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard. Valentina Carter! Her expression shifted from curiosity to pure shock, like she'd just uncovered a secret she wished she hadn't. Within seconds, the reaction was obvious. Her eyes widened, her hand flew to her mouth, and she almost dropped the phone in her lap. She pulled it closer to her face, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She didn't even have to click anything. Right at the top of the search, my photo on the cover of Forbes, headlines with my name, articles, interviews. The title in bold letters screamed a truth that couldn't be denied. The woman behind the $1 billion empire. And she froze completely still. She started reading out loud in a low voice, like speaking the words would make them more real. $1 billion valuation, she whispered, eyes scanning the article line by line, caught between disbelief and discomfort. The tone was soft, but just loud enough to catch the attention of people nearby. And like dominoes tipping over, heads began to turn, glances were exchanged, and a quiet murmur spread like wildfire. The news traveled across the table in seconds, igniting a room that had felt so safe for them just moments ago. "Is that her?" someone whispered, barely breathing. "No way," another muttered, while the phone was passed from hand to hand, shaky fingers enlarging the photo, rereading every line. And suddenly, the same table that had been a stage for their mockery and judgment was now a courtroom of stunned silence and reckoning. The very people who once dismissed me now couldn't even meet my eyes. One of my uncles, the same one who once laughed the loudest, calling my idea just another trendy failed startup, was now tugging at his collar, swallowing hard, avoiding my direction altogether. The man who had enjoyed tearing me down looked smaller now, shrunken, invisible. He didn't say a word, didn't even try to joke it off. He just sat there, frozen, while the truth echoed through the table like something that could no longer be ignored. My mother, sitting beside me, just smiled. She said nothing, but her expression had changed. Gone was the usual submissive look, the chronic discomfort she always carried. There was something new in her eyes. Maybe pride, maybe relief. For the first time, she didn't try to hide it, didn't try to deflect or downplay. She simply smiled, like someone who was finally seeing what had been right in front of her all along. And in that silent smile was more than any words could ever express. I kept eating, calm, grabbing another piece of bread, sipping my water like it was just another ordinary lunch. There was no need to say anything, no need to explain myself, no need to spell out who I was. The internet had already done that for me, loud and clear. In that moment, in that place, there was no room left for doubt or jokes, only the quiet discomfort of people realizing they'd been wrong and no longer knowing what to do with that truth. Everyone around me stayed silent, trying to process a reality that could no longer be hidden or buried under humor. The table, once so familiar and hostile, was now a strange space, heavy with surprise and awkwardness. They looked at me like I was a stranger, someone they'd never actually known. Maybe they never tried. And me? I just breathed, chewed, existed, like I always had, even when they pretended I didn't. As the murmurs died down and the silence settled over us like a thick fog, I realized something freeing. I didn't need anything else. Not an apology, not formal recognition, not even validation. Everything I ever needed was already there. In their nervous glances, in their uneasy smiles, in their restless hands, the truth had been spoken without me saying a word. And right then I finally understood. What I had always wanted from them wasn't acceptance. It was respect. And finally it was there. I finished my coffee with the same calm I'd had when the lunch began. I set the cup back onto the saucer, adjusted the strap of my bag over my shoulder, and stood up without hurry. I looked around, taking in each face, each lost stare, each frozen expression. I smiled, polite, composed, and simply said, "It was great seeing you all." There was no irony, no provocation, no desire for revenge. Just a clean, quiet farewell, like someone closing a chapter, not settling a score. I walked toward the helicopter with steady, deliberate steps, feeling their eyes glued to me like silent arrows that no longer hurt. The wind from the blade swirled my dress, sent small dry leaves scattering across the lawn, while the engine roared, filling the space with its unmistakable sound. No one called out to me. No one tried to stop me. They just followed me with their eyes, like an audience watching the end of a show they never expected to finish quite like this. I climbed into the helicopter with the same serenity I'd had when I stepped out hours earlier. I put on my sunglasses, fastened my seatbelt, and before closing the door gave a brief wave. No dramatics, no theatrics, just a simple gesture, like turning a page without needing to tear it out. The pilot asked if we were ready. I just nodded slightly, keeping that quiet, knowing smile at the corner of my lips. There was nothing left to say, The helicopter lifted off, the roar of the blades drowning out any sound that might have come from the porch. I looked out the window and saw them all still standing there, paralyzed, frozen in the exact spot where they'd watched me arrive. Some with their arms crossed, some with their hands in their pockets, others just staring blankly as the aircraft pulled away. It didn't matter anymore. What needed to be said had already been said, and this time, without me ever having to open my mouth. From up above, the farm looked small, almost insignificant, with its neat rows of trees, the white tables, the perfectly parked cars. The dirt road, which I had traveled so many times with a heavy heart, now looked like nothing more than a winding line through the green landscape. I closed my eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, feeling a peace I never thought I'd associate with that place. There was no more pain, no more resentment, just freedom. Almost instinctively, I reached for my phone in my bag and saw a notification glowing on the screen. I opened the message. Congrats on the latest round. It was from one of my top investors, confirming the success of yet another deal, one that pushed the company's valuation even higher. I smiled to myself as the helicopter carried me farther away, taking with it the quiet confirmation that I had won. I didn't need anything else. Not recognition, not applause, just to keep going. I kept staring out the window, watching the farm shrink, becoming nothing more than a distant green smudge, lost in the vastness of the horizon. There was no regret, no nostalgia, only the absolute certainty that this chapter was definitively closed. The helicopter flew on, steady, cutting through the sky with the same precision and strength that I had used to cut, forever, the ties that bound me to that past. I glanced down one last time, then closed my eyes again. There was no need to look back, no need for justifications. The victory was there, etched in the woman I had become, in what I had built, in the quiet respect that had finally established itself, without the need for speeches. I smiled, more to myself than anyone else, and let out a soft, almost inaudible sigh, like someone confirming, "It's over." The helicopter disappeared into the horizon, carrying not just my body, but also the definitive image of my victory. And them down below, they were left with the silence, with the surprise, with the impact that maybe they'll never forget. I didn't leave any notes. I didn't make any speeches. I simply left. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And if you'd like to help me keep telling these stories, you can buy me a coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Every cup helps me keep bringing you more stories like this one.